Well, for more on the Jackson Hole meetings, I'm joined by Gordon Gray. Gordon is the Director of Fiscal Policy at the American Action Forum. Thank you for joining us.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
So let's start by looking at this year's theme, changing market structure and implications for monetary policy. So looking at this and the program, what stands out to you?
Well, I actually think that this is a timely topic, particularly as observers of incoming economic data are kind of waiting for the last piece of the recovery to come into place, which is wage growth. And central to the topic that the members of this symposium are going to be looking at is productivity and price effects and how it relates to monetary policy. Sort of threaded throughout that concept is the relationship of basically employee-employer relationship and the growth of wages and how productivity can inform that. And I think that that's a central question. It's certainly not something where they're going to emerge from this meeting and say, well, we found the answer, and then sort of traders can take positions on that. Rather, it's more like an academic conference where you get a lot of smart people and actors in this process into a room, and you sort of talk about a timely topic. And so I think that's really an important thing for them to do, but it's certainly not a breaking news kind of topic.
So given that these are essentially just academic discussions, what sort of progress or outcomes can people expect from these meetings?
Well, the hope is, to the extent that you have in these meetings senior leaders, that you actually get kind of senior attention to these topics that are otherwise relegated to kind of people like me talking about them in think tanks and conferences around town, but hopefully elevate the topics that they address kind of to senior levels and to grapple with, because wage growth is kind of the last piece that we're all waiting for, and we kind of wonder, well, what are we understood what traditionally what the inputs are, but as the global economy is changing, like, well, what has that relationship changed? And I think it's definitely worth pursuing and worth studying.
Now, another topic that always seems to come up is income inequality, which is quite ironic considering the setting that these central bankers are in at the moment. So would you say that the Fed or these central bankers, are they out of touch with some of the needs of everyday people?
I can understand why it's easy to sort of draw that conclusion, because when we think Jackson Hole, we think, fancy resorts and stuff. But first of all, it's important to notice they're actually at a federal, like a National Park Service hotel. So it's, in another way, you can think of it, a lot of kind of government employees at a government building talking about kind of wonky topics. Well, that's kind of the kind of thing we would want them to do. So it sort of depends on how you, I guess, how you just kind of describe the event. But rather, my hope is that they go with good intentions, and the goal of the central banks around the world is fundamentally price stability, and the degree to which that basically avoids situations that we see in Venezuela and elsewhere in the world, where the people most harmed are those most vulnerable. And so I think you can have policy outcomes that actually improve that situation for people.
Now, we know that President Trump is a fan of low interest rates, and he recently weighed in showing his disappointment at the U.S. Federal Reserve's pace of rate hikes. So what's your take on how the Fed is going to navigate this, especially now against the backdrop of U.S.-China trade tensions, plus all this domestic political pressure?
Certainly. Well, my hope is that the Fed continues to do what it's always done, which is basically stick to its job, its dual mandate. I have confidence that Chairman Powell will do that. I don't have confidence that this president is going to kind of continue to keep it, or I don't have confidence that he'll keep his mouth shut on these topics. Unfortunately, he's breaking a near 50-year tradition in weighing in on monetary policy that's dangerous. There's empirical research that shows that political interference in central banking leads to worse sort of inflation and price outcomes. So I can't trust the president to do the right thing in this case. So my hope is that the central bankers at the Fed, the Chairman Powell, will do their job.
Now, as we look at what central bankers around the world are doing, obviously taking very different strategies coming off the tail end of this recovery from the global financial crisis, which are the ones that we should be keeping an eye on?
Well, certainly, start here at the United States. They have a tremendous capability to assess the global economic environment and the degree to which it will affect U.S. policy and the rate changes that they may or may not be taking in the future. But beyond that, certainly you can't look at the global interest rate environment without considering the European Central Bank. They're going in a different direction from the Federal Reserve, and that's a function of coming out of the Great Recession. Basically, every central bank had the same problem, and now I think national imperatives across the globe are changing, so we're getting divergent outcomes. So it's just important to keep an eye on a lot of the emerging markets and the degree to which that may entangle other large economies.
All right, thank you so much for your insights. Gordon Gray there of American Action Forum.